right, so we are here in studio and we have Miss Barbara Hemphill in with us today. Barbara is the founder of Productive Environment Institute here in the Raleigh area. And Barbara, once again, is a phenomenal woman in the area of business. So Barbara, I just want to say welcome to the Phenomenal Woman in Christ show.
Thank you for having me, Teresa.
Oh, you are so welcome. You know, we all know of Barbara, the entrepreneur, Barbara, the businesswoman, but how about telling me about who the real Barbara is?
Well, I grew up on a farm in Nebraska. That's my roots. Okay. And I've never really strayed very far from there, although I have geographically. I've lived all over the world. But living there really made me who I am. And kind of like what you see is what you get.
Okay.
My passion in life is giving people hope. And I think that I learned that from my family where I grew up. They were always people that were doing things. I think about my daddy. He was a farmer, and he used to do a lot of things, but he did them very silently. No one ever knew. And I've often said that it wouldn't have mattered if you were the Queen of England or the janitor, when my daddy would treat you in exactly the same way. Wow. And my mother started lots of things in the small community that we lived in. She started a Christmas carol sing in our community. And this year they had, I think it was their 43rd one that they've had, and she started a 4th of July celebration at our church where everyone brought homemade ice cream and homemade cakes, and people came from all around the community. And so they were always bringing hope to people and encouragement to people, and that's really what I want to do through my business and through my life. In fact, that's what I want on my tombstone. She gave others hope.
She gave others hope. So how do you, I know that you are the founder of Productive Environment Institute. So how did that business come into being?
In 1978, I was living in New York City with my husband, and we had just moved there from India, where we had adopted 3 orphan children.
Okay.
And my husband worked for a nonprofit organization, and living in Manhattan, we needed to make some more money. And I was trained as a musician. I grew up with a liberal arts degree and a music teacher, but I couldn't do that there. I didn't have a degree to teach, and our apartment was too small to teach privately. I was like, okay, what can I do? One of my children was special needs, and so I needed to have lots of flexibility. And I decided the best way to be able to control my time was to own my own business. Mm-hmm. And I had read that a lot of successful businesses were started when people listened to what other people were complaining about.
Okay.
So as I sat on the playground with my children, I'd hear people say, we haven't eaten off the dining room table in a month because it's piled full of papers.
Wow.
Or we had to file an extension on our income taxes because we couldn't find the receipts. Or, you know, I just had a fight with my kids or my husband about the clutter in the house. And I realized that on that farm that I grew up in Nebraska, organizing was very key. We weren't neatniks or anything, and we were very poor. My parents had 13 cents the day that I was born. We lived in the second floor of a tenant farmhouse, but if the pastor called and said he was coming to visit us, it didn't take long to get everything together. And so organization was something that I grew up with and didn't realize that not everybody else did.
Okay.
And so I took $7 out of the grocery money and put an ad in a New York City newspaper that said, organizing consultant can help you make better use of time and space. That was a time when there were no organizing books. There was only one. Actually, there was 2. Stephanie Winston had written a book called Getting Organized. I call her the mother of our industry. And then there was another book called File Don't Pile, which was about a filing system, which was incredibly complicated. But there were no organizing stores or books or TV shows or anything like that. I got 3 crank calls. Businesses often have a rough start. And the 4th call was from a widow whose husband was an attorney, and like the shoemaker's kids with no shoes, he was the attorney who died leaving his own affairs in disorganized state. She didn't have any children, so I actually did what a daughter probably would have done, and I started going through the piles and piles of paper in his office and helping her figure out what she needed to do. She didn't know that she was my first client, and I never told her. I just kept working ahead. And what I was really doing was giving her hope, just saying, okay, don't worry, we can get through this. And periodically I would pick up something and say, oh, I don't know how to do that. Well, let's worry about what I do. And that's the way I've done my business my whole life, is let's concentrate on what I do know how to do, and then let's find other people to do what I don't know how to do, because one of my philosophies is together we are better. And so that's another one of my passions, is helping people create employment for people. I train people to be productivity and organizing consultants, so to provide them employment as well.
Awesome, awesome. Now, for those of you that need to know more about Barbara, she is the pioneer, or I like to say she's one of the pioneers in the area of organizing in the business industry. And, you know, she has written books with Stephen Covey. You know, so she knows a lot. Now, I know that you've grown your business. You've been in it now for about maybe 30 years, but where did it take you? I mean, what are some of the things that you had to go through to get to where you are now? Because I think a lot of people, they look at successful people, and a lot of people will consider you to be successful because you've grown your business. But what are some of the things that you've had to go through to get where you are? I know that God is part of your lives, but what are some of the trials you had to go through? What are some of the things that happen behind the scenes? Because, you know, we look at successful people and we think, oh, their life is perfect, but we don't know until we've walked in their shoes. So tell me about some of those steps that you had to go through.
Well, I don't think there's any successful person that has ever gone through life easily.
Yes.
If you are successful, it's because you failed many, many times. And I often tell people that every mistake that could ever be made, I've made. It's really, in order to be successful at anything, number one, I think you have to be doing what God intended you to do.
Yes.
And as a child, my uncle was a missionary to Africa. And for a while I was going to be a missionary. And then I thought about it and realized that by being in business, you can in some ways make a bigger impact, because people expect missionaries to act in certain ways, but they don't always expect business people to. So I see my business as my mission field, and my goal with my business is that other people will feel the love of Christ through me, even though I've never necessarily mentioned his name, and they may not know what it is, but they're going to feel it. And often that gives me an opportunity to talk about it. Sometimes it doesn't, but that's okay. I can give them hope at the same time, and you never know what seeds you're planting. I have had so many things that went wrong. An example would be when I'd been in business a few years. I started out in residential organizing when residential organizing wasn't even an industry. And in fact, I went to the Small Business Administration to ask them to help me start my organizing business, and they just laughed me out of the room.
Wow.
I mean, they said, no one is going to hire you to organize. I mean, they just said, you better figure out something else to do. Okay. I just didn't believe it. And so I just said, well, I'm going to try. And that was when I kept doing it. And I moved from New York City to Washington, D.C., and I went to the Washingtonian magazine, and I said, I've just moved here from New York, and I have a service which I think would be of interest to your readers. And they did a little story about me, about how Barbara Hemphill could come into your home and organize your papers. And then that got put on television, and very quickly I learned that paper was the #1 organizing challenge in the American household. And every time I would work with somebody, they would say, how long do you keep credit card receipts, bank statements? And so I went to the library to get a book on the subject, and there wasn't one. So I thought, oh, well, I'll write it. So I borrowed a book from the library called How to Write a Book Proposal. I wrote the book proposal, and it's like, okay, now what do I do with it? And this is back in 1988 when you didn't publish your own books. I mean, you had to have a publisher. And I happened to have a client who was in the publishing business. And so I went to her, not with the intent that she would publish it, never dreaming that was possible, but just for her to give me some ideas. And so she said, well, tell me about the book you want to write. And so I did. And she said, oh, I think my publishing company would be interested.
Wow.
And it was Dodd Mead Publishing. And they had been in business for over 100 years. They were in New York. And I flew up to New York. I was so excited, and got the book published, and it came out. It was excerpted in Reader's Digest worldwide. I mean, I had a friend in France who read it in French. But at the same time that happened, Dodd Mead declared bankruptcy.
Wow.
So at the time my book was in Reader's Digest all over the world, it could not be purchased anywhere.
Wow.
And not only that, but I had to buy my own book back because that was part of their property.
Okay.
So they were going to sell it. And if they didn't sell it to me, they would sell it to someone else. So I had to go to the bank and borrow money to buy my own book back.
Wow, that's an interesting story.
So there's that's just one of those examples. Through the years, I have partnered with many other people that promised the sky and delivered nothing. And it was very disappointing. You'd partner with someone, you'd think, okay, this is really it. And then it didn't work. But what I've learned from that is that every time it fails, you learn something from it. And today, the things that are working because of the things that I've learned as I've gone through those, those
failures that you've mentioned.
Absolutely.
Like every successful
if you're
person
not failing, you're not trying enough.
That's true. That's very true. That's very true. Well, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk some more with Barbara. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Once again, we have Miss Barbara Hemphill here with us. Now, Barbara, I want you to tell our guests some more about some of the personal things that you went through. What other trials you went through on a personal side?
Well, I mentioned growing up in Nebraska. One of the things there was that I went to a one-room country school with 9 grades and 1 teacher and 30 children. And you know how often in a situation like that, there's one person that is bullied, and I was that person. I wore glasses, I had psoriasis, my legs were crippled. So there were lots of things that kids pick on. Kids can be really, really mean. So I had a very, very difficult childhood in that way and was very, very lonely, and first considered suicide when I was 11 years old because it just didn't seem like there was any reason to live. My parents tried to solve the problem and just really didn't know how to solve it. So that was kind of a rough start, and it was also that I wanted to succeed. I remember very clearly one time we had IQ tests, and the teacher said that there were 3 students that had gotten really high IQ scores, and I wanted to be one of those. And when my mother went to ask the teacher, I remember sitting on that cold cement step just saying, "Oh, please, Lord, I want to be one." And she said, "Oh, no, you weren't." And that kind of even put me into more depression. Years later, I learned from my brother that I was, in fact, one of the high scorers. Well, the teacher told my mother not to tell me because they were afraid that I would quit trying. But I had very much of a black and white attitude. It was either black or white. So it's like, if I'm not smart, then I must be dumb. So I decided at that point I was really dumb. And that made me never want to ask questions. And so going through life, whenever anyone would say something to me that didn't make sense, I was afraid to challenge them because that might make me look like I was stupid.
And you didn't want that.
And I didn't want to appear stupid. And that has been a challenge up until very recently in years, because in dealing in businesses, other very successful business owners or people that I would hire, and they would do something, they would say something, I'd think, "Oh, I don't think that's right, but I don't want to appear like I don't know," so I would let it go. And so it's been very freeing to realize that there's nothing wrong with asking a question. So if someone says something, you can say, "Well, I don't understand that. Could you tell me more? What does that really mean?" And that's been, such a freeing thing. When I was in my 40s, I had been in therapy, I'd gone to church, I'd prayed, I'd read the Bible, I'd done all kinds of things. And finally, I checked into a mental hospital for depression. I just said, I've done everything I know to do. And while I was there, I had an experience with an art therapist. And I hated art therapy because I could never express, what it was that I wanted to. And one day she came in and she said, to ask me to do a collage of some kind of what I thought of me, what others thought of me, and what God thought of me. Yes. And what I thought of me was, all pretty negative. What others thought of me was, everyone thought I was successful. I mean, they thought that I had it all together. I had a wonderful marriage. I had wonderful kids and a wonderful job, and they had no idea the misery that I was in.
Outside looking in.
Yeah. And I think that's true in so many cases. And over on this side was how God see me. I knew intellectually that God loved me. And somehow through the art therapy, I realized that I was trying to earn God's love.
Wow.
And that it was really arrogant on my part to think that there was anything I could do to earn God's love.
Okay.
That He had offered it to me and that my trying to earn it was an insult. And at that point, all the depression went away because I realized that it didn't really have anything to do with me. It had to do with Him and what He had done for me.
And so you were trying to earn, you felt like if you were good or if you did what was right, so to speak, that He would love you more, or
Right.
you would be more special in His eyes or something like that?
Well, just that I just didn't think that I was deserving. You know, somehow I could be deserving. And I think, frankly, there are many Christians that feel that way. And that's not the story. I mean, the story is that we're all sinful,
Yes.
and that He created us all and He loves us all. Recently I read somewhere something that has been so helpful to me. God is the God of I am,
Yes.
not I was. So what you did yesterday, last week, last year, He's not there. And He's not the God of I will be. So if you go into the future and you say, oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? He's not there either. And so in this day and age, it is so important that you stay right where you are right now, and that you not worry about what happened in the past and not worry about what happened in the future, but focus on what is right now, knowing that Jesus is with you every single minute. And that's been my saving grace.
Wow, that is awesome. That is awesome. So how would you say that, where is God in your life now today?
He's with me every single minute of every day. Sometimes I forget, you know, sometimes I say, oh, I got to fix this. And I say, no, I don't have to fix this. You know, He can fix this. I just have to listen. And spending more time with Him, I think, is one of the things that's very difficult to do. We're always thinking, oh, I've got to get this done, I've got to get this done. And, you know, it's about giving first fruits to God, and that means your money, but it also means your time. And so to me, the most important time in the morning is when I get up in the morning and go sit in my living room, which happens to overlook a lake. It's just beautiful, and I can watch the birds and just sit there and have a cup of coffee with God every day. And when I do that, then it kind of keeps me focused. And during the day, when things get tough, just remembering to stop and say, okay, Lord, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do next? And to not worry about what happens tomorrow, because I don't really know.
And that's true. That's very true. Now, you know, during those times when sometimes we forget to sit with God, and we forget we forget that He is really the ultimate guide. Have you ever found yourself having to go back to Him and cry out to Him and say, God, I just don't know what else to do? Or you just find yourself saying, okay, God, throw my hands up. I'm just going to sit here. I'm not going to do anything until you tell me something.
Well, there have been thousands of times when I've thrown myself at His feet and said, okay, you know, I've done everything I know to do. I'm discouraged. I'm stuck. You know, I'm just stuck. And that's when we need to be in community with other people. I mean, that's the reason that I belong to a number of Christian business networking groups, which are I belong to lots of networking groups, but specifically some that are Christian, because those business owners are trying to run their businesses under Christian principles, and it's easy to go to them. And, you know, I think one of the things that came out for me of joining a lot of groups, which I didn't do for many years, has been actually what you said at the beginning of the interview. I actually thought that other business owners had it easier than I did, that they did it right, that I was the only one who got depressed, and I was the only one who made mistakes, and I was the only one who got discouraged, because I started an industry. I didn't have a networking group to go to, and it's only recently that I have started going with other business owners, and now I'm thinking, oh, all these years I was by myself, thinking that there was something wrong with me, that I was struggling, and now I'm with other business owners and they're struggling too, and so then we lift each other up, and that's so helpful to know that you're not alone, that as it says in the Bible, a three-fold cord is not easily broken. So if it's you and someone else and the Lord, then you will make it.
Awesome. Oh man, I am so enjoying Barbara's story, but we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, she's going to tell us some more about her new book. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. Now, Barbara, you have a new book that is out, and it is called Organizing Paper at Home. What to toss and how to find the rest. And this is Barbara's new book, and I want Barbara to tell us about this book.
Well, it still is true after all these years that paper is still the #1 organizing challenge in the American household. There's more fights in families about where did you put this paper or this clutter here, and questions about what do I keep.
Yes.
And my first book was, the very first book that we talked about earlier in the show was called Taming the Paper Tiger.
Yes.
Well, this is that book, except now it's added the technology part of it as well, because not only do we have to deal with the paper, now we have to deal with the technology. So the purpose of this book is to help people understand exactly what they need to keep and to answer what I call the 6 information management questions, which is, what information do I need to keep, in what form, for how long, who's responsible for filing it, who needs access to it, and how can we find it?
Wow.
And those are the questions that every family needs to answer. And so it's designed not to be a book you have to read from cover to cover, but that you can use as a reference book. It's available in paper. It's also available in electronic, however it is that you best get information. And it deals with children's artwork and coupons and photographs and tax papers and memorabilia. And it helps you set up what I call the home office for the business of life.
Wow.
Which is a place where you is a command center, and there's what we call the magic 6. It's the 6 components that make a home office really work for you and for your family.
Wow. Wow. All right. So once again, I want you to look at Barbara's book, Organizing Paper at Home. And if you want to know more about her, please go to her website, and it is
BarbaraHemphill.com.
BarbaraHemphill.com.
And you can also go to organizingpaper@home.com. They're both there. That'll tell you just about the book.
All right, awesome. Okay. Well, Barbara, we've got just a couple more minutes before we close, and I want you to speak into the viewers that may be listening to this. Someone out there may have the gift of organizing just like you did, and what sort of encouraging words can you give to them?
Well, organizing is an art. You know, people often say, what should I do? And that's the wrong question. The question is, what will you do? And in order to know what you will do, the first question you want to ask is, what is the one thing that needs to happen in my life in order for me to feel happy with my progress? When you identify that one thing, and then you organize your life around accomplishing that, the positives from that will roll over into every single thing else that you do as well. So now's the time.
All right. So once again, thank you so much for joining us here. Barbara, thank you for being here.
Thank you,
You're a
Tereciah.
wonderful, wonderful guest. Thank you for joining us on the Phenomenal Woman in Christ show. We look forward to being back in your living rooms once again next week. In the meantime, have a wonderful day and be blessed.